I want to talk about a certain attitude, a certain point of view that exists in what we call the sim football community. There's a certain mindset that has no patience. There's a certain mindset that doesn't understand what it is to build a program, what it is to build a following, doesn't understand the concept of community projects. I'm talking, of course, about Access Football, Maximum Football, and anything else that has come up in the past or will come up in the future. There's a certain mindset that people think they're just walking into a GameStop with $60 in their pocket, and they're looking around to see what there is. But that's not really understanding what the indie football or what the indie game scene in general is about. If you look at a lot of independent games, you'll see that they are not aspiring to be AAA titles because they can't be. Almost by their definition, they can't be AAA titles. They don't have dozens of programmers, millions of dollars, facilities, and time. Most of the time, they're just one or two people that are trying to make something. It's like saying, we have this amount of resources. Let's see what we can do. And you'll see a lot of times that indie games, they'll try to focus on a certain gimmick of some kind. There'll be some game mechanic that they're built around. And that's how they thrive. But coming back to Access and Maximum, there's so much that the doubters are missing. They have this misconception that if they simply wait long enough, some developer, some publisher is going to come out of nowhere and build the game of their dreams. And I'm sorry to say that more than likely that's not going to happen. For the foreseeable future, and by that I mean at least a decade, in my view, or more, we're gonna get more of the same. So we're really at a crossroads. Do we want to play the same game over and over and over again? That is, do we want to play 2K5 for the rest of our lives? Which isn't too bad because it's a great game. Do we want to invest in Madden every year? I don't. Do we want to talk about the good old days when we had Game Day and Game Breaker, Fever, hell, even Blitz? You know? Do we want to just dream about those days, or do we want to move forward?
That'll bring up second down.
Some people have answered that question by taking action, by taking it upon themselves and their partners to build a game. That would be Axis, that would be Maximum, that would be Havo with his upcoming football title. But I don't really think people understand what it takes to make a game. I think it's pretty obvious, even when reading comments about what people would like to see in games, how they criticize football games, because they simply make a request. More interactions between wide receivers and defensive backs. More this, more that. The way he moves his foot isn't technically correct. The way he does this other move is actually supposed to be like this. And I think they're welcome to criticize and say what they want in their games, and that's absolutely fine. But what I'm talking about is having a fundamental understanding of how a game is made, what the limits of games are. I don't think people in this community really have an understanding of that. At least the doubters don't. And I would say much of the rank and file of the SIB community. And I don't say that as an insult. It's just something that they're not really aware of. You know? How many people have time to learn about programming languages, programming logic and design, game design principles, budgeting, scheduling, methodologies like the Agile development method and Kanban and Trello boards and animation, AI programming. I mean, there's all these levels of skill and discipline that go into making not just games, but sports games in particular, because I think sports games of this caliber, like 2K5 and others, are probably some of the hardest to make. And there's this mindset again. There's this mindset that if it doesn't look like what they expect it to, then they're not going to support it. And they're at liberty to think that way. But because of that attitude, because of that inability, that unwillingness to take part in a community project, that's the sort of attitude that's going to prevent developers from investing time and money and resources into this market. Just thinking about that it's a sad day. I mean, if you really step back and think about it, imagine if there was only one first-person shooter game that you could play. Imagine if all there was Call of Duty. You had no Battlefield, no Counter-Strike, you had no Titanfall, no Halo, no insurgency, and the dozens and dozens and dozens of other AAA and independent first-person shooter games. Just think about that. If there was only one shooter game that you could play, the reason why shooter games are so high quality is because the best ones float to the top, because there's competition. Because if you don't like Call of Duty, you can put it down and play Battlefield. If you don't like Battlefield or you're tired of it, you can put it down and play Insurgency or Halo or Titanfall or any of the other countless first-person shooter games that exist. Imagine if there was only one RPG game, right? If all you could play was Diablo, but there was no Path of Exile, no World of Warcraft, no RuneScape, right? Imagine if there's only one puzzle game, if there's some puzzle game that you like, and there was no other game of its kind, and all you had to play was that one game. I don't have to tell anyone how miserable that would be in terms of a gaming experience. Because we all love having choices. The problem here is that sports, and football in particular, is a very, I don't want to say volatile, it's a very sticky market. You can't just jump in, because the football market, not just in real life, but in the virtual world, in virtual football, video game football is dominated by Madden because they have an NFL license. And it doesn't matter how they acquired it, it's the fact that they do have it. And that so many people are attached to the NFL license. Which is fine, if they like a brand, so be it. But because the NFL is almost synonymous with football itself, the visibility of a non-NFL game is going to be minimal, and companies take that into account when they're making their analysis. Is it going to be worth it to make a football game for 100,000 people, let's say? I don't really know how many people would buy a game like that, because Access and Maximum Football, it's not like they're making gobs of money. Maybe in the future they will, but not right now. So it's a market that is hard to get into. One, because the NFL only allows one developer to make their game, and because so many people, on top of that, are stuck to that license. To me, a football game that allowed you to play out your football fantasies, one that deviates from reality in some respect, I think is a better game. But that's a different topic for a different time. So long as people continue to look down upon the efforts of these independent developers, the more trouble they're going to have moving forward, the more trouble they're going to have building a product. Because nobody understands, like I said, the concept of a community project. There's lots of community projects that do well because people go into it and they understand that what they're going to get starting out is not the finished product. It's not the vision, right? The vision is moving forward. The vision is in the future. To be fair, the developers have to show promise in that vision, in that future. And that's why games like Star Citizen maybe have done so well, but received criticism because it's taken so long. But we can find lots of community projects that are smaller than that do well. Not just in games, but in other sorts of products. So I guess my question is, if we're not going to support independent developers, if we're just going to have wishful thinking, why do we even talk about this anymore? Why do we talk about 2K versus Madden? Why do we talk about Game Day or Game Breaker? If we're not willing to support those who are going to try to do something about it.
He's not known for making those big gallops like that. Well, they can run, but they also have a go-to receiver.